So Dilys, how many people have you helped over the years with interviews?
Okay, I think that in the last 20 years, I must have helped thousands and thousands of people with their interview skills, getting ready for interview.
And what are the common mistakes that people make during an interview?
Well, they can make mistakes before the interview actually happens, not asking the right kinds of questions. So if you're invited for an interview, there are a number of questions that you can ask. And also, if you don't have a job description or an indication of salary, this is a really good time to ask before you actually walk into an interview room. So common mistakes, not asking about the format of the interview, what's actually going to happen, what they're going to be going through and how long they could be in an interview. For example, it's not necessarily just a face-to-face chat that you could have. You could be asked to come along for a 2-hour interview and you could be doing a presentation, you could be doing planning exercises, analysis exercises, you could be doing ability tests, psychometric assessments. There are a number of things that could go along with actually going for a face-to-face interview.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've conducted hundreds of interviews and there's only been about two or three people that have actually asked the format of the interview. That's really good advice, actually. I wouldn't have actually even thought of doing that myself. And you're completely in your rights to do that. You're not going to upset a potential employer by doing that. No,
not at all. I hear all the time of people who've been invited for interview and they go along expecting an interview to last for an hour or something and it's just going to be a chat. And it's a half day, there are all sorts of tests going on, presentations that they weren't prepared for. You know, they just didn't know any of that was going to happen. And it might be an oversight on the company's side. Generally, the interviewer would let them know all of that, but it's certainly a good question to ask. Also to ask what they should bring with them, that they might want, the company might want examples of their work. They might want, I don't know, qualification certificates that they need to copy and take to get references for. But a good idea of something to take would be copies of your CV anyway, because the interviewer may have an old version, may not have read it or have it when they go into an interview room. So asking those, what you should bring and what you should expect in an interview. Good questions, I think.
Fantastic. So, talking of questions, I mean, there's a few sort of questions that people ask in interviews, like, you know, what are your weaknesses, or why do you think you're suitable for the job? Is there any questions that you think people should really prepare for and think about?
Definitely. So a very common interview question is, tell me about yourself, and the interviewer wants to know how you meet their requirements, how you match the skills, the experience, the knowledge required for that particular job. So when they say, tell me about yourself, they don't want to know that you're married with 3 children and breed, I don't know, cockapoos or something. They actually want to know how you meet their requirements. So being prepared for that, actually looking at the job description and making sure that you can respond to that. The strengths and weaknesses question, it's not that common, to be honest, that people are asked about their weaknesses, but if they are, to know what they want to say. So a weakness would be something that's irrelevant to the job, something which isn't going to get alarm bells ringing, or something that that they could do a training course for or get a bit of support with, which is absolutely fine. You wouldn't expect somebody to be 100% match to any job. Otherwise, the employer might think that they would be bored. They don't want to, there's nothing for them to grow into. So you wouldn't have to be a perfect match. So having a weakness, a developmental need is fine. Another question that you might want to think about is why are you leaving your job? So having an answer around that, and not being negative about the company that you're wanting to leave, saying something positive about wanting growth and opportunities, or that you're relocating. There are lots of reasons that people might be wanting to look for a new job. And be prepared to talk about the salary that you want. It takes people by surprise that they're sitting in an interview and then somebody comes out with, so what are you looking for in terms of salary? And they go, oh God, I hadn't thought about that. Well, think about it. It's a really good thing to...
That's really good advice. I mean, with that, I guess you need to have an idea of the salary you're looking for, and then just sort of look them in the eye and say it, I guess.
It works for me. The advice that I give is both ways round. So before you go for an interview, understanding what the salary range on offer is, and then when you go into an interview, even if it's quite different from the salary you're actually on, that you wouldn't talk about the salary you're on, you would talk about the salary range that's on offer. So my advice would be for somebody, if they were asked about salary, would be to say, well, what would you consider offering? So that they point it back at the interviewer. And if the interviewer says, well, you know, what do you want? You then are in a situation to say, well, I understand your salary range is X to Y, and I would expect in that range. So it's not unusual for people to go for interviews where the salary, the job role is quite different, the industry may be different, and so the salary might be higher or lower than they're currently on, but they don't want to disclose that. They actually want to point at the salary that they are happy to take in that job situation.
Sure, so that's it's kind of regardless of the salary you're on, you have an idea of what you want, and that's what you say. I mean, presumably you've got to be realistic though, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's got to be within the range that they're offering. So go into an interview knowing that. So you ask that before you go for an interview. So when we were talking about asking about the interview format and how long you can expect to be there, ask that question at that stage, that early stage.
That's really good advice, because I guess you've got that kind of distance from email as well. I guess they have to answer, really, don't they? Is that a legal thing? I mean, could they say that it depends on experience, or kind of fob you off with one of those answers, or do they have to answer that question?
They don't have to, but they have a range in mind. There's a budget for it, so they know exactly what they can offer. There might be some negotiation, there might be some leeway that they have, but you should really know that before you go in. You should be able to gather some information about that. And they should be the ones providing you with it, to be perfectly honest, before you go in for an interview. So I would always ask.
Sure, that's really interesting. So let's go on to talk about, we're talking about sort of what you say in an interview, but also, how important is body language versus what you actually say? There's a lot of talk about body language and posture and sort of tone of voice, but what's your take on that?
My take on it is that you should be yourself, but your best self. So if you aren't feeling very confident about interviews, or you're nervous, which is not unexpected at all, if there isn't a bit of interview nerves, maybe you just don't want the job. So if it's important to you, that you would actually be a bit nervous. You could do something like a power pose or something before the interview itself. So
power pose.
Yes, a power pose is taking up some space. So before the interview, you might want to find a loo, or before you walk into the building, standing with your feet apart, your hands on your hips, taking big deep breaths, making yourself feel bigger. And apparently that doing that for 2 minutes is going to increase your confidence levels. It actually changes the hormone balance in your body and increases confidence. So that's not a bad thing to do. And then going into the interview, walking into the room, smile. A lot of people feel very anxious and they don't actually think about smiling. So looking confident will make you feel confident. So I think that's a really good idea. And when you're sitting down, don't slouch. Sit up straight or lean forward. Actually looks like you're really much more engaged, and it'll make you feel more engaged. So sitting back and looking relaxed doesn't make you feel as engaged as you could do.
Sure, no, I understand that. There has been a lot of, going back to power poses, there has been a lot of research about that, and it does, it's proven that by doing these poses, by taking up the space, it does make you feel more confident. I mean, I guess that is the key, isn't it? It's feeling more confident. What other tips and tricks can you offer to kind of help with confidence in an interview?
Practice. So preparing yourself for the interview, going through the questions that you anticipate being asked and saying them out loud. So either recording yourself, looking in a mirror, or if you're lucky enough to have a friend who will go through the questions with you so that they can give you feedback too. But if you record yourself, even if you're doing it on your phone, you can actually play that back, and you are going to give yourself much better feedback than anybody else. You know how you want to look, and you know how you want to come across. So record yourself and practice,
Sure.
practice.
I mean, I think if I recorded myself on the phone, I think it might give me less confidence than more confidence. But I guess you can see what you do and you can see yourself improving.
Yes, yes, definitely. Well, you know what you look like. You know, you look in the mirror every day. So, and you know how you want to come across to other people. So you might be an exception, Dan, about seeing a video of yourself and not feeling more confident.
Yeah, maybe. So what about kind of interview no-nos, the things you should definitely 100% never do in an interview?
Argue with an interviewer. I don't think that's a very good idea. I can't think of any real no-nos. I'm just being rude. Being negative about your employer or previous employers, being negative about your workmates. That all comes
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I think you're right. That does really put you off because the natural assumption is, well, if you're going to be negative about them, what are you going to be saying about us? You know, should the time come that you leave? So I think that's really good advice. I certainly, anyone who I've interviewed that have been negative about their current position, it's almost a guaranteed no, to be honest.
It's a real shame, but people can get dragged into having conversations and they can end up being negative when maybe they're being really honest, but it's a shame. So you've got to be very aware of what it is you want to say, the message you want to put across. And what you need to concentrate on in an interview is making sure that you demonstrate to the interviewer that you match their requirements. So being very well versed in the job description so that you can talk about the skills and the experience and the knowledge that you've got, which is what they need. I think also that you've got to take into account that an interviewer can be very good at what they do, very good at their job, but they may not be an experienced interviewer. So they may have not had training, they may have not had experience, they may not be having a great day. So as an interviewee, you've got to take some responsibility for getting across that information in an interview. So don't sit and be passive, actually think about what you want to say and make sure that you take opportunities to get that information across to the interviewer.
Sure. I mean, the one thing I've noticed as well is for me, it seems really important to have researched the company, to understand what the company does and what the role is. I know it sounds obvious, but I'm amazed how many people kind of come in having not done that.
Yeah, it's yes, I think that goes under the no-no, doesn't it? Not doing the research. That you have to understand the job description, you have to understand what the company does, what products, services, what affiliations, what sister companies, who are the clients, who are their customers, who are their suppliers. Just understanding their world is going to be really, really important. So,
sure.
Yeah, research.
Yeah.
And also with things like LinkedIn, finding out about the interviewer themselves or interviewers. So looking them up and knowing a bit about them, so you can even talk about their experience in the company and their previous experiences.
Sure, no, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, even to be honest, even outside of interviews, if I'm having a meeting with someone, I'd always check them out on LinkedIn. And I think, and likewise, you know, people do that to me. And I think it's kind of a sign that you're taking it seriously almost, because, you know, on LinkedIn you can be anonymous, but if you choose not to be anonymous, people can see that you've looked at their profile. And I think that's a really, certainly if I'm going to a meeting and I can see they've looked me up on LinkedIn, I kind of feel a lot more confident that I'm going to be taken seriously in the meeting.
Very definitely, yes. So you don't need to be anonymous at all. Actually show that you've looked. And for example, in the interview, taking your research, you said about being prepared and about finding out about the company, print out your research and take that in with you. So when somebody says, oh, what do you know about the company? You can actually say, well, you know, I've done some research, I know this, I know that. And then have some intelligent questions that you can ask about the research that you've done. So what is it about the product lines, the service, where you might fit into the structure, where they see themselves going with their products and services. So you've got some really nice intelligent questions to ask at various stages in the interview, or if interviewers leave it till the end to say, is there anything else you'd like to know, or do you have any questions for me?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And the other thing is about, you know, what do you wear? What do you wear for an interview? Obviously there's different industries, different kind of dress senses, but what's your take on what to wear for an interview?
The day of the suit and tie is very definitely gone. And even in the banking industry, a lot of people wear suits but no tie now. So I would check out what the culture is of the organisation that you're going to. And so, you know, Yahoo, Google, you wouldn't expect to wear anything but jeans and a very trendy shirt or t-shirt. But wear the smartest version of those things, and yeah, be smart, clean, crisp, neat, and the best version that you can be and so that you reflect their culture.
Great, that's really good advice. I guess the last thing, any sort of anecdotal interview disasters you can talk about?
Oh, okay. So I had somebody talk to me a little while ago about an interview that they had, and at the bottom of his CV, he had written that he was interested in football and did some football coaching. So on the way to the interview room, the interviewer started talking about, oh, I see that you are interested in football, what team do you support? And this went on and on and on. And in fact, it really went on and on and on. And 45 minutes later, the interviewer said, oh my goodness, I've got to go off to another meeting now. Great to meet you. And we'll be back in touch. And of course, he didn't know enough about the interviewee to be able to offer them a job. And I think he probably was slightly embarrassed that he didn't know anything at all. They had literally just talked about football for 45 minutes. And it all kind of fizzled into nothing, which is such a shame. So in that kind of situation, my advice would be to turn it around and say, yeah, you know, in fact, you know, I really enjoy coaching. So in my work, I like coaching too, or I would really like to coach more, or take the opportunity to turn it back into something that where you can demonstrate your skills and knowledge, and that, you know, you're sticking with the job description here.
Sure. Rather
than think, what a great interview. I'm talking about football for 45 minutes and we're obviously getting on really well.
Sure. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I've certainly had situations where I've had a day where I've been interviewing sort of 20 people, and you know, at the end of the day, you're kind of getting a bit tired and sort of, you know, maybe not as with it as you should be. And there's always an assumption when you're going to an interview that the interviewer is the sort of expert. But I've had this situation where the interviewee has kind of led me into kind of keeping things on track. And I think, you know, that's a really good trait. And I think, you know, as long as you balance it, it shows initiative to kind of to keep things on track when maybe, you know, the interviewer is a bit jaded because you're number 15 in a day.
Yes, absolutely. And I would definitely advise people to do that. So part of that is understanding about the company background, that you've done your research on LinkedIn, and that you are really, really familiar with the job description. Definitely, so that you're able to do that. And that you do your power pose first, so that you're feeling really confident when you go in, and know that you can actually not sit there and just wait for questions to be thrown at you, that you can actually take a lead and use your initiative. It's really good.
Great. Well, I'm going to go and practice my power poses now.
Good luck.
Thank you.